Revenge with Karen.
You know that smell when a server room hasn't been dusted since the Bush administration. It smells like ozone, burnt plastic, and the accumulated desperation of 1,000 unanswered help desk tickets. That's been my perfume for 15 years. I'm Patricia. I'm the person who makes sure your email works so you can send passive-aggressive notes to Susan in accounting about her yogurt consumption. I'm the one who crawls under your desk to plug in the Ethernet cable you kicked out while daydreaming about early retirement. I am the invisible backbone of this godforsaken company, and usually I like it that way. Invisibility is a superpower. It means nobody notices when you're watching. But 3 months ago, the invisibility started to feel less like a superpower and more like a burial shroud. I was sitting in my office, converted storage closet that hummed loud enough to vibrate my fillings loose, staring at a budget denial email. Before I get into the weeds of how I burned this corporate frat house to the ground, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button and hit the like, because what I'm about to tell you is cheaper than therapy and way more satisfying than your ex's new engagement failing. Seriously, it helps the algorithm find the other disgruntled souls out there. Anyway, back to the grime. The email was from Greg, our new HR director. Greg is the kind of guy who uses words like synergy and drill down unironically while wearing a suit that costs more than my car. The email said, in no uncertain terms, that my request for a basic firewall upgrade, a critical security patch that stood between our sensitive data and every hacker in a hoodies in Eastern Europe, was denied due to budgetary constraints. Budgetary constraints. It's corporate speak for we spent the money on hookers and blow, or in this specific case, something equally shiny and useless. Because 10 minutes after I read that email, I looked out the window. My office might be a closet, but it has a sliver of a view of the executive parking lot. And there it was, a brand new, slate gray Porsche Cayenne. It was glistening in the sun like a wet seal. It still had the temporary dealer tags. And stepping out of it was the CEO's wife, a woman whose primary contribution to society seemed to be posting inspirational quotes on Instagram while wearing yoga pants she'd never done yoga in. I watched her sashay into the building, bypassing security because, of course, the rules don't apply to the royal family. I knew for a fact the CEO, a man named Sterling, because of course his name is Sterling, had been crying poverty in every town hall meeting for the last 2 quarters. Tighten the belts, team, he'd say, looking somber while checking his Rolex. We all have to make sacrifices. Apparently, his sacrifice was settling for the leather interior instead of the suede. I lit a cigarette. Yeah, I smoke, sue me. I don't smoke in the building, obviously, but I have a vape pen that looks like a USB drive, and when the rage gets too high, I take a hit right there in the server room. The fans sucked the evidence away instantly, took a long drag of blue Raz despair, and pulled up the procurement logs. You see, that's the thing about IT. We see everything. We are the digital janitors. When you buy a laptop, I see the invoice. When you subscribe to a premium software package, I approve the license. And when you try to hide a luxury vehicle purchase in the company ledger, you better hope the person reviewing the codes is an idiot. I am not an idiot. I scrolled through the back-end expenses for the month. Didn't take long. There it was, buried under a generic vendor code usually reserved for heavy hardware maintenance. Server rack expansion vendor, Stuttgart Logistics. The amount was exactly $118,000. I almost laughed. It was so lazy. It was the kind of fraud that assumes nobody is looking, or that the person looking is too scared to say anything. They listed a Porsche as a server rack expansion. I guess in Sterling's mind, the car had 4 wheels and a computer in the dashboard, so that's basically IT infrastructure, right? My blood started to boil. Not the hot, flashy anger of a teenager, but the slow, thick, sludge-like rage of a middle-aged woman who has followed the rules her entire life only to get stepped on by men in loafers. I looked at my screen, at the denied firewall request. We were running on security protocols from 2018. If a teenager in a basement decided to ping our network, we'd fold like a cheap lawn chair. But Sterling's wife needed heated seats. I reached into my desk drawer. Underneath a pile of tangled CAT5 cables and empty ibuprofen bottles, I kept a notebook. It wasn't a digital file. Digital files can be wiped. They can be corrupted. IT guys can be locked out of servers. But a physical, spiral-bound, college-ruled notebook, that's forever. That's analog vengeance. I opened it to the first blank page. I'd been keeping this log for years, mostly just tracking minor discrepancies, the business lunches that were clearly dates, the office supplies that were clearly PlayStation 5s. But this was the whale. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote the invoice number. And then I wrote asset tag #00459 Porsche KN. Allocation, server maintenance. User, Mrs. Sterling. Notes does not appear to improve network latency. I closed the book. The red cover was tattered, stained with coffee rings and grease. It looked like garbage. It was the most dangerous object in the building. I didn't know it yet, but the fuse had been lit. I was just waiting for them to hand me the match. And oh boy, did they hand it to me. They didn't just hand it to me, they doused me in gasoline and asked me to dance. The rest of the week was a blur of petty indignities. Greg, the HR wonder boy, started hovering around my department. He was looking for inefficiencies. He asked me why I needed 3 monitors. He asked why my team's overtime was so high. Because the system is held together by duct tape and prayers, Greg, I wanted to scream. Because while you're optimizing synergy, I'm manually rebooting the Exchange server at 3 a.m. so you can get your morning newsletter. But I didn't say that. I just smiled the tight, thin-lipped smile of a woman visualizing his murder with a stapler. We need to be leaner, Patricia, Greg said, leaning against my doorframe, checking his reflection in the glass of the server rack. The board is looking for cuts. We need team players. Are you a team player? I looked at him. I looked at his $400 haircut. I thought about the Porsche. I'm very committed to the infrastructure of this company, I said. Good, he said, tapping my desk, because the upcoming all-hands meeting is going to be a pivot point. We're trimming the fat. I didn't know I was the fat. I thought I was the muscle. But that's the mistake we all make, isn't it? We think competence protects us. We think that if we just do our jobs well, if we keep the lights on and the data flowing, we're safe. We forget that to a leech, the blood is just a resource to be drained until the host collapses. I spent the weekend preparing. Not for presentation, for a war. I backed up my personal emails. I synced my special files to an encrypted cloud drive that the company firewall couldn't touch. I went through the Red Book and cross-referenced every entry with a printed copy of the invoice, which I kept in a fireproof box in the trunk of my Toyota Corolla. Paranoia? Maybe. But just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you. Monday morning came with the heaviness of a funeral. All-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main atrium. The air conditioning was broken again. Another ticket I couldn't fulfill because we couldn't afford the parts, so the room was stiflingly hot. It smelled of cheap cologne, nervous sweat, and the pepperoni pizza they had ordered to boost morale. Nothing says we appreciate you like lukewarm Dominoes while we discuss layoffs. I stood in the back, near the exit. Habit. Always know your egress route. Sterling was up on the stage, wearing a suit that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. He was talking about headwinds and market challenges. He looked tanned. He looked rested. He looked like a man who had spent the weekend driving a very fast car that was technically a server rack. Then Greg took the mic, and the atmosphere shifted. It went from boring corporate drone to something sharper, colder. He scanned the room. His eyes landed on me, and I knew. In that split second, hair on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a frequency. I was about to be the example. We have to address some cultural issues, Greg said, his voice amplified by the speakers I had set up an hour ago. Insubordination, resistance to change, legacy employees who think they own the place. He didn't say my name yet, but he didn't have to. The crowd parted slightly. People shifted away from me like I was radioactive. I clutched my bag. The Red Book was inside, heavy against my hip. I took a deep breath of the stale, recycled air. Let's talk about the IT department, Greg said, smiling. And there it was, the shotgun blast. I wasn't going to be laid off quietly. I was going to be executed. The atrium was silent, save for the hum of the vending machines and the distant sound of traffic. Greg's voice echoed off the cheap drywall. Let's talk about the IT department, he repeated, letting the words hang in the air like a fart in an elevator. Specifically, the refusal to adapt to modern budgeting strategies. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird in a cage of bone. I saw my team, 3 guys in their 20s who I'd trained from scratch, look down at their shoes. They knew, they were terrified. If the manager goes, the grunts are next. Sterling stood behind Greg, arms crossed, looking benevolent and stern, like a disappointed father who just found weed in his son's sock drawer. Patricia, Greg said. He said it with a smile. That was the worst part. He smiled like he was doing me a favor. We've discussed the firewall upgrades. We've discussed the budget. And yet, I'm hearing reports that you've been bad-mouthing leadership to your staff, creating a toxicity that we just can't have in our family-first culture. I hadn't bad-mouthed anyone. I had stated facts. Fact, the servers are overheating. Fact, the licenses are expired. Fact, we are drowning. But in corporate land, stating a negative fact is an act of treason. It's insubordination, Greg continued, his voice rising for theatrical effect. And frankly, it's incompetence. If you can't manage a budget, you can't manage this department. Effective immediately, we are terminating your employment. The room gasped. A collective, sharp intake of breath. Don't fire a 15-year veteran in an all-hands meeting. You do it on a Friday afternoon, quietly, with a cardboard box and a security escort. This was a show trial. This was a public beheading to scare the rest of the serfs into submission. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to shout, to make a scene, to prove I was the emotional, difficult woman they were painting me as. My hands were shaking. I put them in my pockets so nobody would see. I felt the cool metal of my vape pen and the rough texture of a napkin. I looked at Greg. He looked triumphant. He looked like a cat who had just caught the canary and was waiting for the applause. You can leave your badge at the front desk, Greg said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Security will escort you out. Time slowed down. It really does, you know. In high-stress situations, your brain dumps adrenaline and cortisol. The world turns into a high-frame-rate movie. I saw the sweat bead on Sterling's upper lip. I saw a piece of spinach in the receptionist's teeth. I saw a man in a gray suit standing off to the side, near the water cooler. He wasn't an employee. He was holding a clipboard and looking incredibly bored. I recognized him. Not him specifically, but his type. The rimless glasses, the cheap haircut, the absolute lack of soul in his eyes. He was an auditor, an external forensic accountant. They must have brought him in to justify the restructuring, to rubber stamp their lies. A calm washed over me. It was cold and clear like ice water. If I was dead anyway, I might as well haunt the place. Incompetence, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the room was so quiet it carried. Greg blinked. Excuse me? You said I was being fired for incompetence regarding the budget, I said, stepping away from the wall. I started walking toward the front of the room. Not toward the stage, toward the accountant. Patricia, this isn't a debate, Greg snapped, his smile faltering. Security, 2 rent-a-cops guys I've shared donuts with for a decade, took a hesitant step forward. I shot them a look, the don't you dare look I used when they tried to bypass the web filter to watch sports. They froze. I kept walking. My heels clicked on the linoleum. Click, 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 sound of a clock counting down. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a weapon, though I'm sure Greg panicked for a second thinking I might. I pulled out the red book. It looked pathetic. The spiral binding was bent. The cover was peeling. It looked like the diary of a madwoman, and in a way it was. It was the diary of a woman maddened by greed and stupidity. I stopped in front of the accountant. He looked up, startled. You're the forensic auditor, right? I asked, nodded slowly. I am. Name's Miller. Mr. Miller, I said, loud enough for the back row to hear. I'm being fired for managing the budget incorrectly. I think you should see the real budget. Patricia, Sterling shouted from the stage. The benevolent father mask dropped. That is company property. You are unauthorized to. I ignored him. I handed the book to Miller. It's a personal log, I said. My handwriting, my observations. But the invoice numbers, those are real. Can look them up in the Oracle database. Assuming they haven't been deleted yet. Miller took the book. He looked at it with the distaste one might show a dead rat, but he opened it. Patricia, step away. Greg was coming down the stairs now, looking flushed. This is harassment. Page 42, I said to Miller. Start there. Miller flipped the pages. The room was paralyzed. 80 people holding their breath. Even the hum of the vending machine seemed to stop. Miller found page 42. He adjusted his glasses. He read the entry. He paused. He squinted. Then he did something beautiful. He stopped looking at the book and looked up at Sterling. The look wasn't bored anymore. It was confused. It was the look of a man who just found a cockroach in his soup. Mr. Sterling, Miller said. His voice was dry, papery. Sterling froze. This is a disgruntled employee, Miller. Don't waste your time. Mr. Sterling, Miller repeated, ignoring the CEO's command. Why is there an entry here, cross-referenced with a hardware invoice, that lists a Porsche Cayenne under server maintenance? The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets. I looked at Greg. His face had gone the color of spoiled milk. I looked at Sterling. He looked like he was trying to calculate how fast he could run to the Cayman Islands. Sterling started, but the words died in his throat. And Miller continued, turning the page. Why does the off-site data storage facility address match a condominium in Aspen? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching the sheep realize the fence is gone. I'll leave you to it, I said to Miller. I have to go pack my box. I turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. Could feel the chaos erupting behind me like a nuclear shockwave. The murmurs started low and turned into a roar. I walked past the stunned receptionist, past the security guards who were trying very hard to look at the ceiling, and out into the hallway. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore, from adrenaline, from the sheer, unadulterated high of dropping a grenade into the lap of the man trying to strangle me. I made it to my office, my closet, had about 10 minutes before they cut my access. I knew how IT worked. I wrote the protocols. I sat down at my desk, my fingers flying across the sticky keyboard. I didn't steal data. That would be illegal. I just ensured that my personal backups were secure, and I sent one final command to the server. A little dead man's switch on the logging system. If anyone tried to delete the transaction history for the last 3 years, it wouldn't delete. Would archive to a read-only partition and email a copy to the board of directors. Petty? No. Insurance. My screen flickered. Access denied. They were faster than I thought, or maybe they just pulled the plug on the wall. It didn't matter. The seed was planted. The book was in Miller's hands, and Miller looked like the kind of guy who really cared about where the decimal points went. I grabbed my framed photo of my cat, my stash of emergency Snickers bars, and my coat. I walked out of the building into the harsh sunlight. I lit a real cigarette this time. My hands were steady. I was unemployed. I was likely going to be sued. But for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't invisible. I was the storm. I sat in my Corolla, the engine idling, watching the building. The air conditioning in my car works about as well as the company's moral compass, which is to say, it blows hot air and makes a rattling noise. But I didn't care. I watched the front doors. Usually, an all-hands meeting lasts an hour. This one ended 12 minutes after I left the room. The doors burst open. It wasn't an orderly exit. It looked like a fire drill where nobody knew where the exits were. People were streaming out, phones pressed to their ears, thumbs flying across screens. The pizza party was over. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kevin, one of my junior sysadmins. Kevin is 22, wears anime t-shirts to client meetings, and is a wizard with SQL databases. OMG Pat, Sterling is screaming at the accountant. Greg is crying. I think Greg is literally crying. They kicked everyone out. What was in that book? I smiled and typed back, just the specs, Kevin, just the specs. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the lot, driving right past the slate gray Porsche. I couldn't resist. I slowed down. I rolled down my window and hocked a loogie. It landed perfectly on the driver's side window. Childish? Yes. Unsanitary? Absolutely. Did it heal a small part of my soul? You bet your ass it did. I drove to the nearest dive bar. It was 11 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday. The place smelled of bleach and regret. Perfect. I ordered a whiskey sour. The bartender, a guy named Al who looked like he'd fought in 3 different wars, didn't even blink. Rough day? He asked. Best day of my life, Al, I said. Just fired my boss. Cheers to that, he grunted. While I nursed my drink, I thought about the book, the red book. It wasn't just a list of expenses. It was a timeline of arrogance. You see, fraud starts small. It starts with a team dinner that includes 3 bottles of $200 wine. Then it's a conference trip to Vegas where the conference is 1 hour and the networking is 3 days at the blackjack tables. Then, when nobody stops them, and the IT lady just processes the invoice because she wants to keep her job, they get brave. They get stupid. The Porsche was just the tip of the iceberg. The server rack expansion was bold, but the cloud storage redundancy project, that was my favorite. They billed the company $45,000 for off-site storage. The address for the vendor was a residential plot in Florida owned by Greg's mother. Unless Greg's mom was running a data center in her sunroom next to her orchids, that money was gone. I knew Miller would find that one. It was on page 56. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from Sarah, the receptionist. Security just locked down the executive wing. They're shredding stuff. I can hear the shredders from the front desk. It sounds like a giant hamster chewing on cardboard. I took a sip of my whiskey. Shredding? Amateurs. you can shred paper. Can't shred a digital footprint unless you know exactly where to look. And the only person who knew the map of the network was currently drinking cheap whiskey and eating pretzels. I realized then that I had crossed a line. There was no going back. I wasn't just a disgruntled employee anymore. I was a whistleblower. And whistleblowers don't get severance packages. They get lawsuits. I needed to be smart. I opened my laptop, my personal one, beat-up Dell that weighed a ton but ran Linux like a dream. I connected to the bar's Wi-Fi. I needed to secure my perimeter. I logged into my bank account. I moved my savings to a different bank, one that the company didn't use. I changed my passwords. I locked down my social media, not that I used it much. I prepared for the siege. Then, I saw the notification. A login attempt on my personal Dropbox. Source IP, 192.168.1.10, that was the office internal IP. Specifically, the executive subnet. They were trying to get into my personal files. They were trying to find out what else I had. They were guessing passwords. Password 123. Company name 2023. It was pathetic. It was desperate. I typed a quick command into my terminal. I have a script set up, a honeypot. Looks like a folder labeled Illegal Downloads Evidence. If you click it, it doesn't open. It just executes a script that loudly plays the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song on the user's computer at maximum volume and locks the screen for 5 minutes. I watched the log. File accessed. Script executed. I chuckled. Somewhere in that executive suite, Greg or Sterling was staring at a frozen screen while tuba music blared, unable to turn it off. "You're smiling," Al said, wiping a glass. "I just imagined a clown getting hit with a pie," I said. "Classic," Al said, but the smile faded quickly, because I knew what was coming next. Silence, then threats, then the lawyers. Sterling wasn't the type to roll over. He was a cornered rat and rat's bite. I needed legal counsel. Real counsel, not the strip mall lawyer who did my divorce. I needed a shark. I Googled whistleblower attorney state. The results were promising. Expensive. Promising? I finished my drink. "Al, keep the tab open," I said. "I have a feeling I'll be back." I walked out to my car. The sun was high now. The world looked normal. People were walking dogs, delivering mail, living their lives. They didn't know that 3 miles away, a mid-sized logistics software company was imploding because a middle-aged woman decided she was tired of being treated like furniture. I checked my phone one more time. A new email from a generic Gmail account. Subject: we need to talk. Body: Patricia, this is Miller, the accountant. We need to meet, not at the office. There are discrepancies that go beyond the car. Page 88. The consulting fees, I need context. Can you meet me at the diner on 4th in an hour? Come alone. I stared at the screen. Page 88. Consulting fees. Oh, right. The consultants. 3 women who were listed as user experience experts, but had 0 LinkedIn presence, and whose invoices were always paid via wire transfer to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Miller had found the harem. I started the car. The engine rattled, but it started. "Hang on, Miller," I whispered. "I'm bringing the receipts." The diner on 4th is the kind of place where the menu is sticky and the coffee tastes like battery acid filtered through a gym sock. It was perfect. Nobody from the C-suite would ever be caught dead here. They were allergic to vinyl booths and waitresses named Barb who call everyone sugar. I spotted Miller in the back corner booth. He looked out of place. His suit was too crisp, his posture too rigid. He looked like an undercover cop in a bad movie. He had the red book open in front of him, flanked by an untouched cup of coffee and a plate of dry toast. I slid into the booth opposite him. He jumped slightly, covering the book with his hand. "Relax, Miller," I said, signaling Barb for coffee. "It's not a show, it's just felony embezzlement." He adjusted his glasses, looking around the diner nervously. "Patricia," he said, his voice a hushed whisper, "do you have any idea what you've handed me? A one-way ticket to unemployment?" I asked, "or a Porsche?" "Depends on who you ask." "The Porsche is the least of it," he said, tapping the page. Page 88. These user experience consultants, 3 of them, billed at $5,000 a week each, for 2 years. "Yeah," I said, pouring sugar into the black sludge Barb had just dropped off. I looked up their IP addresses once. Curiously, they all logged in from the same luxury apartment complex in Miami, and they never submitted a single line of code, report, or ticket. Not one. Miller looked pale. I checked the vendor registry. The tax IDs belonged to shell companies. "Patricia, this is looking like money laundering or paying for services that are definitely not IT related." Hookers, Miller, I said flatly. You can say it. They're high-end escorts. Sterling thinks he's slick, but he's just a cliché with a corporate credit card. Miller rubbed his temples. If this gets out, the stock will tank. The board will be liable for lack of oversight. The SEC will get involved. Good, I said. Burn it down. I can't just burn it down, he hissed. I have a fiduciary responsibility. I need proof. The book is a lead, but it's not proof. I need the digital trail, the emails approving these invoices. The wire transfer authorizations. They locked me out, I reminded him. They're probably shredding the servers right now. Miller looked at me. A long, calculating look. You were the IT manager for 15 years. You built the system. Are you telling me you don't have a back door? I took a slow sip of coffee. Burned my tongue. I looked at Miller. Could I trust him? He was a suit, but he was an auditor. Auditors care about numbers making sense. They hate chaos. Right now, Sterling was chaos. I was the key to order. Hypothetically, I said, leaning in. If there were a shadow backup, a mirror of the procurement server that updates in real time to a private server, where would one look for it? Miller's eyes widened. Hypothetically, I continued, might look for user account named sysadmin ghost. And the password might be the first line of the company mission statement, backwards, with A at the end. Miller pulled out a notepad and scribbled furiously. But Miller, I grabbed his wrist. He froze. If you use that, you burn them, all of them. Sterling, Greg, the CFO, everyone who signed off. There's no going back. If they find out I gave you access, they will come for me. Legally and probably personally. Already coming for you, Patricia, Miller said, pulling his hand away. I got a call from legal on the way here. They're drafting a cease and desist. They're talking about a civil suit for theft of proprietary data, meaning this book. Let them come, I said, though my stomach did a little flip. I need to verify the wire transfers, Miller said, standing up. He threw a 20 on the table, if this ghost account works. This is Enron level stupid. But Patricia? Yeah, stay safe. These guys are arrogant, but they have money. Money buys scary friends. He hurried out of the diner, clutching the red book to his chest like a holy text. I sat there for a while, staring at the grease stains on the table. Enron level stupid. I liked the sound of that. My phone rang, unknown number. I stared at it. It rang 4 times before I picked up. Hello, Patricia. The voice was smooth, slick. It sounded like a lawyer. This is Jonathan Vance, representing Sterling Logistics, calling to discuss the return of company property currently in your possession. I don't have any company property, I said. I left my laptop on the desk. We're talking about the logbook, Patricia, Vance said. His tone dropped an octave. And we're talking about the confidentiality agreement you signed in 2008. If that book is shared with unauthorized third parties, we will be forced to seek damages. Significant damages. We're talking your house, your pension, your future. Is that a threat, Jonathan? It's a reality check, he said. Bring the book to the office by 5 p.m. We're prepared to offer a severance package. 6 months' pay and a neutral reference. If you cooperate, 6 months' pay, hush money, it was tempting. For a split second, the tired part of me, the part that just wanted to pay my mortgage and watch Netflix, thought about it. 6 months. I could find a new job, could forget Sterling and his Porsche and his Miami consultants. Then I looked at the coffee cup. Styrofoam, cheap, disposable. That's what I was to them, disposable. If I took the deal, they'd win. They'd keep the Porsche. They'd keep the escorts. And in 6 months, they'd find a reason to sue me anyway. Jonathan, I said, you can take your severance package and shove it up your exhaust pipe. Patricia, be reasonable. I don't have the book, I lied. I gave it to a friend. What friend? Vance's voice cracked. His name is Miller, I said. Maybe you know him. I hung up. I blocked the number. I was shaking again. I lit a cigarette right there in the booth. Barb walked over with the pot. You can't smoke in here, Han, she said gently. Sorry, Barb, I said, dropping a 10 on the table. I'm celebrating. Celebrating what? Burning a bridge, I said, sliding out of the booth and watching the fire spread. I walked out to the car. Had a feeling the ghost account was about to get very busy. I needed to get home and monitor the fireworks. But first, I needed to buy some wine, cheap, boxed wine, because if I was going to watch the world burn, I wasn't going to do it sober. My apartment isn't much. It's a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a complex that smells perpetually of curry and dryer sheets. But the 2nd bedroom is my sanctuary. I call it mission control. 3 monitors, a server rack I salvaged from a dumpster in 2015, and an ergonomic chair that cost more than my couch. I poured a glass of Sunset Blush, boxed, $14.99, and settled in. I fired up the VPN, not the company one. They'd killed that certificate an hour ago. I used the backdoor I'd mentioned to Miller, the ghost account. I built it 4 years ago when Sterling insisted on streamlining our security by firing the night shift monitoring team. I needed a way to patch servers from home without waking up the VP of operations for approval every time. It was a violation of policy. It was also the only reason their network hadn't been held for ransom by Russian botnets twice a week. I was in. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Usually, logs scroll by at a lazy pace. A log in here, a file saved there. Today, it was a waterfall of red text. User, Greg HR executing delete command on directory. /HR/performance reviews /user, CFO office accessing archive, /finance/wire transfers 2022 /system alert, bulk delete attempt blocked by admin policy. I laughed out loud. Miller didn't waste time. Must have used the ghost account to initiate a legal hold. A legal hold is the digital equivalent of freezing time. It locks every file, every email, every version history. You can try to delete it, and the system will say file deleted, but in reality, it just moves it to a hidden folder labeled evidence. I watched Greg try to delete the same folder 6 times. Attempt 1, failed. Attempt 2, failed. Attempt 3, failed. Sanity is doing the same thing over and over, and expecting different results. Greg, I whispered to the screen, taking a sip of wine. Then the emails started flying. I couldn't read the bodies of the encrypted ones, but I could see the subject lines and the recipients. From Sterling CEO to Jonathan Vance legal subject, urgent stop the auditor from Greg HR to Sterling CEO subject, she knows about the renovations. Renovations. Frantically cross-referenced the red book in my memory. Ah yes, page 62. Office improvement, 3rd floor, $80,000. We don't have a 3rd floor. The building only has 2 floors, but Greg just bought a new house. I bet his kitchen has some really nice marble countertops. I felt a strange sense of dissociation. For years, these people had been my gods. They decided my salary, my hours, my worth. I had walked on eggshells around them, afraid to ask for a raise, afraid to speak up. Now, they were just pixels on a screen, scrambling like ants under a magnifying glass. I was the kid with the sun in my eyes. A new alert popped up. A system-wide broadcast. To all staff from IT support, the new guy, probably an intern, subject. System maintenance, do not log off, oh honey, I said. That's not maintenance. They were trying to seize the laptops. We're going to go desk to desk and confiscate machines to scrub them locally since the network was locked. I opened a terminal window. I could stop them. I could issue a command to brick every laptop on the network. Just a simple sudo rm rf/. It would be the nuclear option. It would destroy the company. Innocent people, Sarah the receptionist, Kevin the anime kid, would lose their work, their projects, maybe their jobs. My finger hovered over the enter key. I thought about the Porsche. I thought about Greg's smile when he fired me. But I thought about Kevin. Kevin, who texted me when my cat was sick. Kevin, who covered my shift when I had the flu. I withdrew my hand. I wasn't them. I wasn't a monster. I was just the janitor. I was cleaning up the mess, not burning down the house. Instead, I sent a single message to Kevin via an encrypted chat channel we used for gaming. Me, Kevin. If anyone asks for your laptop, give it to them. But take out the hard drive first. Tell them it crashed. Kevin, they are literally walking down the row now. Greg looks like he's having a stroke. He's sweating through his jacket. Miller is following him with a clipboard, writing down everything Greg says. It's glorious. Good boy, Miller, I murmured. Then my screen went black, not the computer. The connection. The ghost account was kicked. Connection terminated by remote host. Found it, or Miller locked me out to cover his own tracks. Smart. If I was still logged in, they could blame the hack on me. By kicking me out, Miller was sanitizing the crime scene. I sat back in my chair. The link was cut. I was blind again. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The legal hold was active. The files were preserved. The red book was in play. I poured another glass of wine. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion. I was unemployed. I was alone. I was drinking boxed wine in the dark. But then I remembered the look on Sterling's face when Miller asked about the Porsche. Worth it. My doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a long, insistent press. I looked at the clock. 7:30 p.m. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a process server. It was Linda. Sterling's executive assistant, a woman who had treated me like the help for a decade. She was holding a bottle of expensive champagne and a manila envelope. She looked terrified. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. "Patricia," she said, her voice trembling, "can I come in? I think I need to show you something." I looked at the champagne. I looked at her eyes. She wasn't here to threaten me. She was here to defect. "Does it pair well with boxed blush?" I asked, stepping aside. "It pairs well with revenge," she said, walking in. Linda sat on my beige IKEA sofa like she was afraid she might catch poverty from the fabric. She was wearing a trench coat over her office clothes, clutching the manila envelope like it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. "Nice place," she lied, glancing at the pile of laundry I hadn't folded in a week. "Cut the crap, Linda," I said, handing her a glass of the cheap wine. "I kept the champagne for myself." "Why are you here?" "Sterling sent you to plant a bug. Tell him the roaches already have the place wired." Linda took a gulp of wine, winced, and then sighed. The executive assistant mask melted away. She slumped. She looked 10 years older than she had this morning. "Sterling didn't send me," she said. "Sterling is currently locked in his office with his personal lawyer, shredding documents that the shredder keeps choking on. He's panicked, Pat. He's calling people I've never heard of. Fixers. And you. I'm the one who books the travel," she whispered. "I'm the one who coordinates the offsites. I'm the one who answers the phone when his wife calls asking where he is, and I have to say he's in a strategy session when I know he's at the Ritz with a 20-year-old consultant." She opened the envelope. It wasn't financial records. It was photos, printed emails, handwritten notes. "I kept my own file," Linda said, "not like your book. Mine is messier. It's the personal stuff. Mistress's apartment lease in her name, paid by the company credit card, the receipts for the jewelry. The paternity test results from 2019. I stared at the papers. My red book proved fraud. Linda's file proved moral bankruptcy. Together, they were a nuclear warhead. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Why not go to Miller?" "Because Miller is a suit," she said. "He'll cut a deal. He'll protect the board to save the stock price. He'll sacrifice Sterling, sure. He'll bury the rest to keep the company afloat. I want them to burn, Pat, all of them, for how they treated us." Linda had been there longer than me. She had fetched their coffee, lied for them, covered their affairs, and they treated her like a piece of office equipment. "Cheers to that," I said, raising my glass. We spent the next hour going through her file. It was disgusting. It was hilarious. Sterling had expensed a hair transplant as roof repair. Greg had expensed a purebred French bulldog as security K9 unit. Then my laptop chimed. A new email. From Board of Directors, via Jonathan Vance, subject. Proposal for consulting agreement CONFIDENTI ALBA. I spun the laptop around so Linda could see. "Dear Patricia, in light of recent discoveries regarding system irregularities, Board recognizes that your unique knowledge of the legacy infrastructure is invaluable. We would like to engage you as an external security consultant to assist in the audit and reconciliation process. Proposed rate, $250/hour. Retainer, $20,000 upfront. Condition, execution of a non-disclosure agreement regarding all past and future findings. They want to buy you," Linda said, her lip curling. "Want you to come back and help them bury the bodies." $250 an hour, I mused. "That's 4 times what I made this morning. Are you going to take it?" I looked at the email. It was a lot of money. It was security. I could pay off my car. I could fix the AC. But then I read the last line again. Non-disclosure agreement. They didn't want my help. They wanted my silence. Wanted me to help Miller make the numbers add up so they could minimize the damage, pay a fine, and go back to buying Porsches. I hit reply. To Board of Directors, CC, Miller Forensic Audit, subject proposal, Dear Board, my consulting rate is $500/hour. My retainer is $50,000. And regarding the NDA, no. I will assist Mr. Miller in uncovering the truth. I will not assist you in hiding it. See you in the morning. I'll bring donuts." "Patricia," I hit send. Linda stared at me. "You just turned down 20 grand to tell them to go to hell?" "No," I said, pouring more champagne. "I just told them that the price of my dignity has gone up due to inflation." Linda laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and sharp. "You're crazy, Pat. I'm a systems technician for the soul, Linda," I said, channeling a strange spark I didn't know I had. "The wiring in this company's morale is fried. I'm just flipping the breaker back on." "So what happens tomorrow?" Linda asked. "Tomorrow," I said, "we go to work. But not for them. For the truth, I should go, Linda said, standing up. I need to feed my cat, and I need to delete some emails from my sent folder before Miller gets to them. Don't bother, I said. The legal hold captured everything at 11 o'clock a.m. If you sent it, they have it. Linda paled, but added, I know the guy who manages the archive. Kevin, I might be able to ask him to misplace a few specific files, if they aren't relevant to the fraud. Linda looked at me with tears in her eyes. Thank you. Get out of here, Linda, I said, and drive safe. Watch out for Porsches. She left. I was alone again. The high was wearing off, replaced by the cold reality of what I had just done. I had declared war on a corporation with unlimited resources, would drag my name through the mud. They would investigate my life. They would find out about my unpaid parking tickets and that time I stole a stapler in 2009. But I had the red book. I had Linda's file. And I had Miller, who, despite being a suit, seemed to have a taste for blood. I went to the window. I looked out at the parking lot of my apartment complex. My beat-up Corolla looked noble under the street lamp. We ride at dawn, I whispered to the car. Then I went to bed. I slept like a baby who had just set fire to a dumpster and was dreaming of marshmallows. The next morning, I didn't wear my usual hoodie and jeans. I put on a blazer I hadn't worn since my grandmother's funeral. It smelled slightly of mothballs and victory. I drove to the office. The gate arm was down. My badge didn't work, obviously. I pressed the intercom button. Security, a voice crackled. It was Dave. Good old Dave. Morning, Dave. It's Patricia, Pat. I can't let you in. List says you're banned. Dave, I said, leaning out the window. I'm here to see Mr. Miller. If you don't let me in, I'm going to tell him you've been using the security monitors to watch Netflix for 3 years. There was a pause. The gate arm lifted. Thanks, Dave. I parked in my usual spot, way in the back. But as I walked toward the entrance, I saw it. The reserved spot closest to the door. CEO was empty, no Porsche. I walked into the lobby. The atmosphere was post-apocalyptic. People were whispering in corners. The receptionist, Sarah, looked up and her eyes went wide. She gave me a subtle thumbs up under the desk. I walked straight to the elevators. Nobody stopped me. I went up to the second floor, the executive suite. The glass doors were open. Boxes were everywhere. It looked like a moving day, but with more sobbing. I found Miller in the main conference room. He had turned it into a war room. Whiteboards covered in diagrams. Stacks of paper everywhere. My red book sat in the center of the main table like the Bible on an altar. Miller looked up. He looked exhausted. He hadn't slept. You're here, he said. I saw your email. You have balls, Patricia. I have documentation, Miller. Better than balls. The board is freaking out, Miller said, rubbing his eyes. They rejected your fee, obviously. They agreed to give you immunity if you help us decrypt the ghost logs. Deal, I said. Where do we start? The CFO, Miller said. He called in at 6 a.m., medical leave, heart palpitations. He's currently on a flight to a non-extradition country, if I had to guess. He won't make it, I said. I tracked his company phone. He's at the airport, but his flight is delayed. Weather. Miller stared at me. You tracked his phone? I'm the admin, Miller. I track all the devices. Forgot to turn it off. Miller smiled. A real, genuine smile. God, I love IT people. We spent the next 6 hours dissecting the corpse of the company. It was worse than I thought. The consulting fees were just the start. There were phantom employees, people on the payroll who didn't exist, their salaries being routed to shell accounts controlled by the VP of sales. There were vendor rebates that were just kickbacks. Around noon, Greg walked in. Looked like he had slept in a dryer. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. He saw me sitting at the head of the table, eating a bagel. What is she doing here? Greg demanded, his voice cracking. She's a terminated employee. This is a breach of sit down, Greg Miller said, not even looking up from a spreadsheet. I am the HR director, Greg shouted. I determine who is allowed in this, Greg, I said, wiping cream cheese from my lip. Looking at your home office stipend from 2021. You claimed $12,000 for ergonomic workstation. The invoice is from a company that sells hot tubs. Greg froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. It has hydrotherapy features, Greg stammered, for back pain. Caused by sitting a hot tub, Greg, Miller asked, looking over his glasses. You expensed a hot tub. Everyone was doing it, Greg yelled. Sterling bought a boat. Got him boat? He listed it as Marine Logistics Research. The room went silent. Miller slowly picked up his pen. A boat, Miller repeated. Do tell. Greg realized his mistake. He had just ratted out the boss to save himself. The crab bucket mentality in full effect. I shouldn't have said that. Too late, I said, typing on my laptop. Searching for Marine Logistics. Oh, here it is. $250,000. Vendor, seize the day yachts. Nice pun. Miller looked at Greg. Go to your office, Greg. Don't touch your computer. Don't touch your phone. Just sit there and wait for the police. Police? Greg squeaked. This crossed the line from civil to criminal about 4 hours ago, Miller said. Federal fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement. Greg turned and ran. Literally ran. We heard his footsteps pounding down the hallway. He's going to the shredder, I said. Let him, Miller said. We have the digital backups. Thanks to you. I looked at the whiteboard. The lines of fraud connected everyone. The CEO, the CFO, HR, sales. It was a cancer. And for 15 years, I had been the one keeping the host alive, unknowing. How did nobody notice? I asked quietly. They did, Miller said. They just didn't care. As long as the stock went up, nobody looked in the basement. Well, I said, closing my laptop. The basement just flooded. The elevator dinged. 2 men in windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets, in yellow letters, FBI. Miller stood up and buttoned his jacket. Showtime. I stayed in my chair. I wasn't part of this. I was just the janitor. I watched as the agents walked toward Sterling's office. I heard a shout. I heard a thud. Then I saw Sterling being led out in handcuffs. He looked at me. He looked right at me. There was no arrogance left, just confusion. Looked like a man who couldn't understand how the help had become the executioner. I raised my bagel in a toast. Drive safe, I whispered. The days following the raid were a blur of surrealism. The office stayed open, technically, but it was a ghost town. The coffee machines ran dry and nobody refilled them. The plants started to wilt. The family first posters in the break room peeled off the walls, as if rejected by the building itself. I wasn't an employee anymore, but I was there every day. Miller had deputized me as a special advisor. It meant I got a visitor badge and a desk in the corner of the conference room, but no benefits. I didn't care. I was there for the show. The rumors were wild. Someone said Sterling had a secret family in Brazil. Someone said the CFO was caught trying to cross the Canadian border with a suitcase full of gold bars. The truth was more boring. They were all out on bail, sitting in their mansions, blaming each other. Greg resigned to pursue other opportunities. The email went out on a Wednesday. After 5 years of dedicated service, I have decided to move on to new challenges. I replied to the all-staff list because Miller had reactivated my email. Reply all. Good luck with the hot tub, Greg. I heard laughter erupt from the cubicles outside. Real laughter. The tension broke. But it wasn't all funny. People were scared. The accounts were frozen. Payroll was delayed. The innocent people, the ones who actually did the work, were the ones suffering. Kevin asked me if he should start looking for a new job. Kevin, I told him, you should have been looking for a new job the minute they denied the firewall upgrade. Run. He did. He got a job at a bank the next week. I wrote him a recommendation letter that described him as the only intelligent life form in a black hole. The board appointed an interim CEO, a woman named Sharp. She was terrifying. She had short gray hair and wore suits that looked like armor. She didn't care about synergy. She cared about survival. She called me into her office on her second day. Sterling's office. It had been stripped bare. No pictures, no knickknacks. Just a desk and a chair. Patricia, she said, not looking up from a file. Miller tells me you're the reason I'm here cleaning up this mess. I just provided the flashlight, I said. Mess was already there. He says you know where the bodies are buried. I know where the digital graves are, I corrected. We need to rebuild the IT infrastructure, she said, from scratch. Secure, compliant. No backdoors, no ghost accounts. That will cost money, I said. I know, she said. She looked at me. I'm offering you your job back. Director of IT, double your previous salary. Full autonomy. I stared at her. Director, double salary. It was everything I had wanted for a decade. It was validation. It was victory, but I looked around the office. I saw the ghost of Sterling sitting there. I smelled the stale cologne. I felt the weight of 15 years of being invisible. No, I said. Sharp blinked. Excuse me? I don't want to work here, I said. This place. The walls are stained with it. You can scrub the books, Sharp, but the rot is in the drywall. Then what do you want? I want to be a consultant, I said. External, I come in, I fix your mess. I bill you $500 an hour and I go home to my cat. I don't answer to HR. I don't attend culture meetings. I just fix the pipes. Sharp studied me. She respected power. She saw that I wasn't asking, I was telling. Fine, she said, contractor status. But you sign an NDA. I'll sign an NDA for future work, I said. But the past, the red book, that stays mine. Miller has the book, she noted. Miller has a copy, I lied. I have the original, she sighed. Fine, get out of my office and go fix the server. I walked out, I felt lighter. I wasn't an employee. I was a mercenary, and mercenaries get paid up front. I walked past Greg's old office. It was empty. The nameplate was gone. I peeked inside. The desk was clean. But in the corner on the floor was a single, lonely object, a stress ball. One of those cheap, branded ones. Sterling Logistics, we deliver excellence. I picked it up. It was squishy. I squeezed it. Excellence, I chuckled. I tossed it into the trash can. Cobe, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Greg last name has viewed your profile. I smiled. He was looking. He wanted to see if I was gloating. I updated my headline right then and there. From IT manager at Sterling Logistics to CEO at Red Book Consulting, specializing in forensic cleanup and Porsche disposal. I hit save. I walked down to the server room, my old sanctuary. It still smelled like ozone, but the hum was different now. It wasn't a death rattle, it was a heartbeat, and for the first time I held the controls. But there was one loose end. The Bible-thumping mom, Greg's mother, the one with the cloud storage sunroom. I pulled up her address on my phone, Florida. I wasn't going to Florida, but I knew someone who was. I opened a new email to anonymous tip at IRS Gov subject, tax fraud/shell company activity. I typed quickly. I attached the PDF of page 56. Forgiveness is divine, I muttered, hitting send, but an audit is mandatory. The final act didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in the boardroom 3 months later. I was invited to testify to the full board of directors, not the local managers, the big guns, investors from New York who owned the holding company that owned Sterling Logistics. They sat around a mahogany table that cost more than my education. They looked like a row of vultures in expensive suits. Sharp was there. Miller was there. And sitting at the far end, looking shrunken and gray, was Sterling. He was out on bail, allowed to attend only to answer questions regarding asset recovery. I walked in. I was wearing jeans and a band t-shirt, Pink Floyd. Wall, I didn't care. I was billing them for the time it took me to walk from the door to the chair. Miss Patricia, the chairman said. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Miller indicates that your personal records were instrumental in uncovering this web of deceit. You're welcome, I said, spinning slightly in the leather chair. We have one final discrepancy, the chairman said. A sum of $500,000 is unaccounted for. It was withdrawn in cash over a period of 5 years. Mr. Sterling claims he doesn't recall where it went. Mr. Miller cannot trace cash. They all looked at Sterling. He stared at the table. I need to know, the chairman said, leaning forward. Was there another partner, another shell company? I looked at Sterling. I knew where the cash went. I had found a folder on his laptop labeled the fix. It wasn't a fix. It was hush money. Had an illegitimate child in 2015. He had been paying the mother off in cash to keep it quiet. If I revealed this, it would destroy his family completely. His wife, the Porsche lady, would leave him. His kids would hate him. It was the nuclear option. Sterling looked up at me. His eyes were pleading. He knew that I knew. He was begging for mercy. The man who denied my firewall. The man who let Greg fire me publicly. He was begging the janitor for a lifeline. I thought about mercy. I thought about the high road. Then I thought about the text I got from Linda yesterday. She was struggling to find work because her name was tied to the scandal. Collateral damage. The cash, I said slowly, holding Sterling's gaze. The room held its breath. The cash was used for lifestyle enhancement, I said. Gambling debts. Illegal sports betting, very messy. No paper trail. Sterling's eyes widened. I had lied. I had covered his affair. Why? Because gambling is a vice. An affair destroys a family. I didn't care about him, but I didn't want to be the reason a kid grew up without a father, even a scumbag one. Also, knowing I held his darkest secret was a far better punishment. I owned him now. Forever, the chairman sighed, gambling, pathetic. Very well, we will add it to the civil suit. Sterling slumped. He mouthed a silent thank you. I winked at him. Don't thank me, you're still going to prison. I stood up. We done? I have a server migration at 2 o'clock. Yes, the chairman said. Thank you, Patricia. We will wire your final consulting fee. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked out of the building. The sun was shining, the air smelled of exhaust and freedom. I got into my Corolla. It started on the first try, good girl. I drove home. I didn't go back to the mission control room. I went to the living room. I sat on my couch. I opened a beer, not wine, beer. I turned on the TV. I pulled up YouTube. I searched for Danny DeVito eating an egg asthma. Don't judge me, it's soothing, the crunching, the chewing. It's the sound of a man who doesn't give a damn what anyone thinks. I took a sip of beer. My phone buzzed, a notification from the bank. Deposit received $50,000 and 0 cents. I smiled, then another notification from TikTok. It was a video from Tyler, the app affair partner of Sterling's wife. He'd been tracking him for fun. The video showed him wearing a vintage Vietnam jacket, my dad's jacket, the one Sterling's wife had accidentally donated to Goodwill when she organized the office charity drive 3 years ago. I recognized the patch. Caption, Thrift Store Gold. Vintage fit for a king. I stared at the screen. The war wasn't over. I cracked my knuckles. I opened my laptop. Okay, Tyler, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see if your tax returns are as vintage as that jacket. Danny DeVito crunched an egg on the TV. I took another sip of beer. I was healed. We were all healed, except Tyler. Tyler was about to have a really bad week. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.